Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jaya Radha Damodara Radha Damodara Radhe Jaya Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe Jaya Lalita Vishaka Shri Radhe Jaya Nitai Gaurasinda Gaura Hari Jaya Nitai Gaurasinda Gaura Hari Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astu Tarasata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swami Namine Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Stuttamane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastetya Rastamine Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayet Nasta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So good morning, Hare Krishna devotees. This morning we are reading from Canto 5, Chapter 14, Text 27. And we are continuing with the forest. So again, the verse is in prose, paragraphs, sentences. I'll just read it. Advani amusmin ima upasagas tata sukha dukha rakha dvesha bhaya bhimana pramadon madha shoka moha loba matsaryava manha sut vipasadi vyadi janma jara maranadaya. Synonyms: Advani, on the path of material life. Amusmin, on that. Ime, all these. Upasargaha, eternal difficulties. Tata, so much also. Sukha, so-called happiness. Dukkha, unhappiness. Raga, attachment. Dvesha, hate. Bhaya, fear. Abhimana, false prestige. Pramada, illusion. Unmada, madness. Shoka, lamentation. Moha, bewilderment. Lobha, greed. Matsarya, envy. Irshya, enmity. Avamana, insult. Shut, hunger. Vipasa, thirst. Adi, tribulations. Vyadi, disease. Janma, birth. Jara, old age. Marana, death. Adaya, and so on. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. In this materialistic life, there are many difficulties, as I have just mentioned, and all of these are insurmountable. In addition, there are difficulties arising from so-called happiness, distress, attachment, hate, fear, false prestige, illusion, madness, lamentation, bewilderment, greed, envy, enmity, insult, hunger, thirst, tribulations, disease, birth, old age, and death. All these combine together to give the materialistic conditioned soul nothing but misery. Sure. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai. The conditioned soul has to accept all these conditions simply to enjoy sense gratification in this world. Although people declare themselves great scientists, economists, philosophers, politicians, and sociologists, they are actually nothing but rascals. Therefore, they have been described as mudas and naradamas in Bhagavad Gita 7:15. Namantaskrino mudha prapatyante naradama maya ya prityagrana ashuram bhavam ashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Due to their foolishness, all these materialists are described in Bhagavad Gita as naradamas. They have attained the human form in order to get released from material bondage, but instead of doing so, they become further embarrassed amid the miserable material conditions. Therefore, they are naradamas, the lowest of men. One may ask whether scientists, philosophers, economists, and mathematicians are also naradamas, the lowest of men. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead replies that they are, because they have no actual knowledge. They are simply proud of their false prestige and position. Actually, they do not know how to get relief from the material condition and renovate their spiritual life of transcendental bliss and knowledge. Consequently, they waste time and energy in the search for so-called happiness. These are the qualifications of the demons. In Bhagavad Gita, it says that when one has all these demonic qualities, he becomes a mudha. Due to this, he envies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, birth after birth, he is born into a demonic family, and he transmigrates from one demonic body to another. Thus, he forgets his relationship with Krishna and remains in Aradhama in an abominable condition, life after life. End of purport. Translation again. In this materialistic life, there are many difficulties, as I have just mentioned, and all of these are insurmountable. In addition, there are difficulties arising from so-called happiness, distress, attachment, hate, fear, false prestige, illusion, madness, lamentation, bewilderment, greed, envy, enmity, insult, hunger, thirst, tribulation, disease, birth, old age, and death. All these combine together to give the materialistic conditioned soul nothing but misery. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmei Shri Gurube Namaha Panchakalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So good morning, devotees. We continue on this intense verse, how the material world is compared to a great forest of enjoyment. And we hear some themes in this translation and purport. One of the themes is material life has many difficulties and gives nothing but misery. Another one is of these difficulties, some are insurmountable. Another theme is, so what are the sources of these difficulties? And they are listed. And then Srila Prabhupada jumps straight into Bhagavad Gita, verse 15 of chapter 7, called the knowledge of the absolute, describing the rascals, so-called rascals, and how they do not surrender unto Krishna. And then I thought another theme we can extract from this is, because we hear about what happens when there is no surrender to Krishna, then perhaps we can discuss what is surrender, how to surrender, and hear from each other about this. So if we think then about the first theme, material life has many difficulties and gives nothing but misery, kind of a little hopeless situation, but at least the reality, a good reality check. We've been reading in previous verses, like the past 26 verses and beyond even, there's Maya, there's the modes, there's suffering, there's plunderers, there's sense gratification, money issues, family issues, Griha Medi issues, when it's not Grihasta, sex life issues, destruction of memory, greed for riches, wealth, it went on and on in this great forest of material enjoyment, which is quite overwhelming. No sleep, exploitation, stealing, cheating, lamentation. So, and here even more is listed. And so these bring nothing but misery. And then the other theme is, some of them are actually insurmountable. There's actually no respite, no relief, no solution on the material platform. And then, and then the other theme is, so what are these difficulties? Let's list them. And they're listed in this verse. If kind of one just reads to them, it's quite tiresome. So-called happiness, even that's a difficulty. Even that difficulties arise from. Distress, we've all experienced that. Attachment in so many different grades. Hate, fear is something that's stays with us in so many different levels. False prestige, very hard to let go of. Illusion, madness, lamentation. With that comes bewilderment. All of that, is around greed and envy and enmity. And then there's insult, when there's all these crazy things happening, and what to speak of hunger, thirst, tribulations, and what to speak of the great four: birth, disease, old age, and death. And so it kind of looks really, gray and pessimistic. But this is what is happening. These are kind of good reality checks in this great forest. This is what we go through. And then Prabhupada is talking about this particular verse, which actually starts to describe these particular types of personalities that are, one, victims of all of this, and two, they perpetuate it. And, he quotes the verse, those miscreants from Bhagavad Gita 7:15, who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So we hear about 4 categories of people: grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, where their knowledge is stolen by illusion, and then those of just straightforward atheistic nature. They don't surrender unto Krishna. What do we hear about them? We hear that because they don't surrender unto Krishna, because of all of these, they cannot surrender unto Krishna. So some compassion is there for them. They're just kind of victimized by all of this. But then, it's perpetuated. And so we get this demonic kind of infiltration. Fortunately, as devotees, we know that, by surrendering ourselves unto the lotus feet of Krishna, we can surmount, as Prabhupada says, the most stringent laws of material nature. But then the question arises, Prabhupada explains, is how is it that educated people, philosophers, scientists, businessmen, administrators, all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender unto Krishna, who is all-powerful? And, even mukti is sought of by leaders of mankind in different ways. There are great plans and perseverance for great many years and births, but if that liberation is possible simply by surrendering unto the lotus feet of Krishna, why don't these intelligent, hardworking leaders adopt the simple method? This is Prabhupada in his purport posing this question. And he says the Gita answers this question very frankly. So we know that there are 2 types of leaders. There's the really learned leaders, and there's, of course, these demoniac leaders. Who are these really learned leaders? Prabhupada lists them for us. He calls them the really learned leaders of society, like Brahma, Shiva, Kapila, the Kumaras, Manu, Vyasa, Devala, Asita, Janaka, lists all of them. Prahlad, Bali, later on Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya, so many. He says they're all faithful philosophers, politicians, educators, scientists, and they surrender at Krishna, all-powerful authority. But what happens is those who are not actually philosophers, scientists, educators, administrators, they pose themselves as such for material gain, and they do not accept the plan and path of Krishna. And they have no idea of God. They simply manufacture their own worldly plans, and consequently, they just complicate problems of material existence in their vain attempts to solve them. And material energy on top of that is so powerful, cannot resist the unauthorized plans of the atheists. So the atheists are miscreants. And kriti means one who has performed meritorious work. And the atheist plan maker is sometimes so intelligent, so meritorious, because any gigantic plan, good or bad, must take intelligence to execute, right? But because the atheist brain is improperly utilized in opposing the plan of Krishna, then the atheistic plan maker is called Duskriti, which indicates that his intelligence is so misdirected. And we see countless examples in this day and age on this misdirected intelligence. So we hear again in Bhagavad Gita, the material energy works fully under the direction of Krishna, no independent authority. It's like a shadow, Prabhupada says, And it's very powerful. But the atheists, unfortunately, due to their godless temperament, they don't know how it works. And, under illusion and the modes, all their plans are baffled, like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, and they just smashed to dust, although they were both materially learned as scientists, philosophers, administrators, educators. Prabhupada lists these 4 types of people: scientists, philosophers, administrators, and educators. So they're miscreants. And so what are the 4 different patterns? Prabhupada calls them the different patterns. And we can go into a lot of detail, but we'll just touch on them very quickly. They're the mudas, number 1, grossly foolish. This is kind of the situation where it's just so hardworking because of the desire for sense enjoyment. Prabhupada gives the analogy of the ass, the bird, a beast of burden, working so hard day and night, just for the master, no personal gain, just happy, this little bit of grass to fill his stomach. And then he has a sex appetite where he gets kicked by the opposing party, and he just brays. His sound is a braying sound. It's a disturbance. So this is the foolish, fruitive worker. And he does not know that action is meant for sacrifice, that karma is meant for yajna. And so this person, is the muda. And really very, very, very unfortunate. And then, of course, there's the discretee, or the miscreant. Another class of of course, is the naradama, another class of discretee or miscreant. So Prabhupada then, in this long purport in Bhagavad Gita, he explains Nara means human being and Adama means the lowest. So out of the 8,400,000 species of life, of living beings, 400,000 are human. And of these, there are numerous lower forms that are mostly uncivilized. And what is the difference? Civilized human beings have regulative principles of social, political, religious life. And, they have, and whereas the Naradamas, they don't. So, it's, they don't understand that there's an authority above them. And we know that when the civilized form of life, it's meant for reviving our lost consciousness of our eternal relationship with Krishna. So this category of person, the Naradama, they're just not able to be able to understand Krishna. They just don't understand. They don't have all that supporting infrastructure to have that. And it's a very unfortunate situation, because we understand how, if that's not there, then generation after generation, this is continuing. Prabhupada is saying it is the duty, when the children are born, how to revive their divine consciousness. It's the duty of the guardians. I mean, we use different samskaras also to do that. And so he says, unfortunately, 99% of the population of this world is Naradama. So when the whole population becomes like this, then, education is just null and void. And so that's really unfortunate. And he goes on to explain so much more here. Then, of course, another class of discretee is the Maya Pritagyana. And those, they have erudite knowledge, but it's nullified because it's stolen, diluted by material energy, illusory, all the way. And, they mostly very learned fellows, Prabhupada says. Again, he quotes those 4 categories, but the illusory energy misguides them, and therefore they obey Krishna. He says, there's a great number of these at the moment. Even among scholars of Bhagavad Gita, we hear about them. And that's why so many versions of the Gita, and Prabhupada has given us as it is. And so that's a very, very unfortunate situation with all these unauthorized interpretations by this class of person, or this category of person. They are, what Prabhupada says, outside the purview of the Parampara system. And they're just deluded interpreters, and they cannot teach others to follow. And then the last class is the Asuram Bhavam Asrita. And this is the unfortunate one of the demonic principles also. They're just openly atheistic. They argue that the Supreme Lord can never descend in this world. They're unable to give tangible reasons why. They make Krishna subordinate to the impersonal feature of the Lord. They're always, in opposition to what is declared in Bhagavad Gita. And they also present illicit incarnations manufactured in the, Prabhupada says, the factory of the brain. And, they just not a good situation. Prabhupada concludes that particular purport in this way. He says, Sri Yamuna Charya Alabandharu of South India said, "Oh my Lord, you are unknowable to persons involved with atheistic principles, despite your uncommon qualities, features, and activities, despite your personalities being confirmed by all the revealed scriptures in the quality of goodness, and despite your being acknowledged by the famous authorities renowned for their depth of knowledge in the transcendental science and situated in the godly qualities." So Prabhupada concludes, therefore, the grossly foolish persons, the lowest of mankind, the deluded spectators, and the professed atheists, as I mentioned above, they never surrender unto the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, in spite of all scriptural authoritative advice. So it's a very, very unfortunate situation that we have with these four types of persons. They're just not able to do it. So then what do we do as devotees, at least? How do we surrender? What is surrender? Let's hear a little bit from Srila Prabhupada on that. Let's see, quickly pull up. So in Nectar of Devotion, we hear Prabhupada talking about complete self-surrendered. He says there's a nice description in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 29, verse 32, where Krishna says, "A person who has completely surrendered unto me and has completely given up all other activities is protected by me personally, both in this life and in the next." So then I wish to help him become more and more advanced in spiritual life. Such a person is to be understood as having already achieved Shasti, having equal opulence with the Supreme. So what a personal and reassuring commitment Krishna makes when we can surrender. A person who is completely surrendered unto me, has given up all activities, is protected by me personally. I think that's something we can take great shelter of. Nectar of Devotion continues, it's also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that as soon as a person surrenders, as we know, unto Krishna's lotus feet, he takes charge of him and gives him a guarantee of protection from all sinful reactions. And what happens is even more amazing is that we also get instruction from within so that we can make very quick advancement towards spiritual perfection. But of course, we always have to check these instructions from within. We have our spiritual master, we have our devotees, sadhus around us, we have Shastra. So it's understood that the self-surrender, and we hear about the 9 processes, is called Atma Nivedana. So according to different authorities, self is differently defined. Self is sometimes referring to the spirit self or the soul, and sometimes self is considered to refer to the mind or to the body. But full self-surrender means not only surrendering oneself as spirit soul, but also surrendering one's mind and body to the service of the Lord. So that one, it's an ongoing endeavor on the part of devotees, that we just want to surrender our mind and body to the service of the Lord. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung a nice song in this connection, that my mind, my household affairs, my body, whatever is in my possession, my dear Lord, I offer to you for your service. Now you can do with them as you like. You are the supreme possessor of everything. So if you like, you can kill me, or if you like, you can give me protection. All authority belongs to you. I have nothing to claim as my own. So very, very beautiful prayer that we can repeat. My mind, my household affairs, my body, whatever is in my possession, my dear Lord, I offer to you for service, and you can do with me as you like, because you are the supreme possessor. Even if we start off on a very, initial level of maybe not having so much faith and feeling in what we're saying, we can at least reflect and try to endeavor to do what is requested in this prayer and how we can make this prayer. Sri Yamunacharya also has said, my dear Lord, I may be living within some body as a human being or as a demigod, but whatever mode of life, I do not mind, because these bodies are simply byproducts, the three modes of material nature, and I, who am in possession of these bodies, am surrendering myself unto you. So therefore, a devotee is always saying, Prabhupada is quoting here also. In Hari Bhakti Viveka, there is a statement regarding how one can offer his body in self-surrender. So we're given some guidance, some instruction, some coaching. There the devotee says, so this is what we can say, my dear Lord, as a sold-out animal has no need to think about his maintenance and sustenance. So, because I have given up my body and soul unto you, I am no longer concerned with my maintenance and sustenance. So, this prayer has to be given with lots of maturity, of course, with lots of responsibility. Cannot just relinquish responsibilities and expect to be taken care of. No, we endeavor. So there's an explanation given here. In other words, one should not bother about his personal or family maintenance or sustenance. If one is actually surrendered in body and soul, he should always remember that his only concern is to be engaged in the service of the Lord. Of course, again, with maturity, with responsibility, we are engaged in Radha Damodar service and Krishna service while we're maintaining everything. But we do know that and I think many of us have had glimpses of this, or maybe consistent experience, that as we engage in the service of Krishna and Radha Damodar and cows and all that Prabhupada has given us, that all our needs are met, in one form or the other through all these divine arrangements. Srila Rupa Goswami says that devotional service in friendship and devotional service in self-surrender are two different processes. Excuse me. Therefore, such relationships with the Lord can very rarely be seen. So only for the advanced devotees are these two processes easily executed. The purport is that it is very rare to see surrender, which is mixed with sincere ecstatic devotion. One must give himself completely to the will of the Lord. I was thinking about this because it's such a high level of surrender. Excuse me. But I was hearing one devotee say how there are three types of surrender. If you want to think about it broadly, when we come to devotional life, how initially we surrender to something, someone, we're in a situation. So we want to hear, okay, how do I get out of the situation? So we approach a book, a person, and hopefully we approach a devotee in Bhagavad Gita. So, there's some surrender to that. And then after we approach a person, a book, then we surrender to that, a book, a person, then we hear more, and then we surrender to a process. That's our sadhana bhakti. We're surrendering to that. And then as Krishna, by the time we're reading Bhagavad Gita, surrendering to the book, the devotees, books of Prabhupada, the process, then we hear Krishna say, surrender unto me. And that's, the absolute surrender, to surrender unto Krishna, the person. That's where the real true surrender is. I heard one devotee say how absolute surrender is obviously when our will and Krishna's will is aligned. We're all striving to get to that. There's more instruction given here. We have a few more minutes. In the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, Krishna tells Uddhava, my dear friend, if someone offers me the best things in his possession or anything which is very pleasing to him, he will be eternally benefited. And then they continue here in the Narada Pancharatra. There's a statement of how one can act in all spheres of life for the satisfaction of the Lord. That's what we've been given also, how to act in all spheres of our life, not that we separate and fragment ourselves. It is stated that a person who is actually in devotional service must be engaged in all kinds of activities, those prescribed in the revealed scriptures and also those which are accepted for livelihood. So such pragmatism, so much practicality. So in other words, a devotee should engage himself not only in the prescribed duties of devotional service, which are mentioned in the revealed scriptures, but he should also perform the duties of his practical life in Krishna consciousness. For example, a devotee who has a great establishment, a factory, may offer the fruits of such a material possession for the service of the Lord. So very self-explanatory, very revealing. And then In the Hari Bhakti Vilas, we hear about self-surrender. My dear Lord, a person who has surrendered himself unto you and is in firm conviction that he is yours and actually acts in that way by his body, mind, and words can actually relish transcendental bliss. And then the Nishinga Purana, Nishingadev says, anyone who prays unto me, takes shelter from me, becomes my ward, in my care, and I protect him always from all sorts of calamities. So some reassuring verses after and instructions after hearing about the intensity and the forest of material enjoyment. And then, of course, we can also unpack just Atmanivedana as Prahlad Maharaj describes it and go into depth there to understand surrender even more. I think there's a nice example given. Let's see. Okay, let's see quickly here. Atmanivedana refers to the stage at which one has no motive other than to serve the Lord and surrenders everything to the Lord and performs his activities only to please Krishna. Such a devotee is like a cow that is cared for by her master. When cared for by her master, a cow is not in anxiety over her maintenance. Such a cow is always devoted to her master and never acts independently, but only for the master's benefit. Some devotees, therefore, consider dedication of the body to the Lord to be Atmanivedanam, and as stated in the book known as Bhakti Viveka, sometimes dedication of the soul to the Lord is called Atmanivedanam. And the best examples, as we know, are often quoted, are found in Bali Maharaj and Ambarish Maharaj, and I think there's a whole lot of other examples too. So let's see. So I think the kind of message for today also is, approaching the Lord in full surrender after hearing the intensity of the material world. And there's so much happiness and fulfillment in surrender. I was reading so much to say. Let's see. Yeah. I was reading one article that I think Mother Krishnanandini had written, and she ends this article by saying, the great Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains the happiness that comes from surrender in his song about surrender. He says to the Lord, I have become supremely happy by surrendering myself at your lotus feet. Sorrow has gone far away, and there are no more cares. All I see is joy in the four directions. Your two lotus feet are reservoirs of immortal nectar that grant freedom from both sorrow and fear. Resting in them, I have found peace and have completely given up the fear of worldly existence. That was from Sharanagati. So we're hearing from many devotees and many sources in Shastra and this presentation of the material forest of enjoyment and then surrender. And I'll wrap up here and love to hear from all the devotees on the call to repeat the translation. In this materialistic life, there's so many difficulties, as I've just mentioned, and all of them are insurmountable. Difficulties arising from so-called happiness, distress, detachment, hate, fear, false prestige, illusion, madness, lamentation, bewilderment, greed, envy, enmity, insult, hunger, thirst, tribulation, disease, birth, old age, and death. All these combine together to give the materialistic conditioned soul nothing but misery. Thank you, devotees. Love to hear your reflections. And thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dharaka Prabhu.
Thank you once again for a lovely class. I love these subject matters. I think some maybe don't like to hear it so much, but I find it relishable and entertaining, actually. Sometimes you have to laugh when you consider how ridiculously miserable the plight of the fallen conditioned soul is. It's lamentable, but pathetic. Um, I'm always struck by the contrast, the sharp contrast between the position of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is one of pessimism towards material life, and that of the materialists who try to be somehow positive about material life. The advice is always to look at the bright side, to try to see somehow or other the silver lining, to be positive. You should be positive. But Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't say that. Srimad Bhagavatam advises us that there actually is nothing to be positive about in material life. It is all very negative. It's a recurrent theme throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. It's repeated endlessly by our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada as well. Hundreds of times, Srila Prabhupada speaks about being pessimistic. He advises pessimism. Usually, and at least within material life, the advice is that you should not be pessimistic, you should be optimistic. Srila Prabhupada advises that we should be pessimistic. We should be very pessimistic about material life, but we should be optimistic about spiritual life. The miseries of material life should serve as impetus to progress. There are countless examples in Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here's a quick paragraph from Bhagavad Gita. This is the purport to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, texts 8 to 12, where Krishna is talking about what constitutes knowledge and what constitutes ignorance. So he gives this list. Srila Prabhupada says, once you try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease, there are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb and the mother, its suffering, etc., are all graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, no one wants to become old, but there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. So, countless examples. That's just one, but Srila Prabhupada repeats again and again the importance of being pessimistic about material life. These are topics that should be discussed, how miserable material life is. This is the opposite of what non-devotees will do. They try to be positive. A person who is pessimistic will be shunned. People will avoid someone who they will regard them as negative, a pessimist, a wet blanket, a downer, a buzzkill. People don't like to associate with such an individual with such a negative attitude of life, because you hang around with them and it rubs off. Then you develop a negative attitude. And God forbid we should ever be negative about material life, because if you're a non-devotee, that's all there is. That's all you've got. There isn't anything else. There's no alternative. So you have to try to be positive about it. However bad it is, you want to see the bright side of it, because there isn't anything else. So, you'll just multiply your misery if you can't find something positive in life. but it's a very bad situation. It's a very bad situation, and we need to get out of it. Trying to find bright spots in that very miserable situation serves only to make us complacent about it. That's not what we want. And we don't want to dwell on the miseries of material life to the extent that we become depressed and debilitated by that consciousness. But in a portion sufficient to provide us with an incentive to energetically apply ourselves to effecting a solution, because it is possible to become so discouraged and so negative that that you just become hopeless and dejected and depressed. You can develop a mentality that is counterproductive, but that should not have to happen if simultaneously you cultivate knowledge of the actual positive side, which is spiritual life. If you're also cultivating spiritual life while simultaneously cultivating an understanding of the misery, the evil of material life, then there is no reason to become miserable and depressed. You can be hopeful. You can be positive because you know that you're moving towards a real solution. And by practicing Krishna consciousness, you can directly perceive your progress towards that goal. Your miseries are mitigated simply by hearing and chanting the holy names, by reading the books and taking prasad, associating with devotees, and so on. So anyway, pessimism is a good thing.
Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Harika Prabhu. Anyone else has anything to share before we sign off? You can hear Guru Puja has started.
Hare Krishna. Good morning.
Hare Krishna.
So that was such a wonderful class. I was writing this lengthy thing in the text, and I said, "Oh, maybe I have a minute to say it." What really your class made me think about, oddly, was John Milton's Paradise Lost, in the second book, where Satan says it's better to reign in hell than to be a servant in heaven. And that, unfortunately, quite often, I think this is what becomes of the conditioned souls. They just get so bogged down and bound. It's like life after life, you're switching seats on the Titanic. You're going to crash and you're going to go down. And it doesn't matter if you're in steerage or you're all the way up on the higher decks. You know, it's all going down. Yeah. And yet, you know, there were people, rich people on the Titanic, who actually paid the band to play while the boat was sinking. And I think that sometimes this is what happens. And then the sadness is that hope and help are like a hair's breadth away. There are temples everywhere. You know, there's Sankirtan, there's prasadam being distributed, there are books being distributed. And it's almost like you could just not even have to get on the ship if you could just have access to this. But the sadness is that a lot of people will, and they'll still decide that it's better to reign in hell, you know? So thank you so much for your class. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your reflections. Thank you. Anyone else? We'll wrap up here. Thank you so much, devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the assembled devotees.